Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining me for today's webinar. My name is Erica Appiah, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Mental Health and Wellness Consultant with Gardening Wellness and Learning Initiatives. I'm really excited to be in this virtual space today and to host today's webinar that's going to be focusing on how we can use compassion to deepen and strengthen our relationships in the workplace, especially after a disagreement has occurred, a conflict has occurred, or a misunderstanding has happened. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I'm on traditional territories of many First Nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Chippewa, and the Wendat peoples. I pay tribute to their legacy and the legacy of all First Peoples of Canada with respect and with gratitude. I choose to reflect on the meaning of respect and the responsibility I share for the sustainability of these lands, as well as how I can do my part to ensure that Indigenous peoples across Canada and the lands they were forced to share with us is centered in my work. I believe that we all have a responsibility to not only acknowledge the grounds on which we are privileged to live and to work, but to also continue to grow our learning of Indigenous histories and realities. I share responsibility to restore relationships with the caretakers of this land that is based in peace, friendship, and trust through my commitment to reconciliation, partnership, and understanding. I would like to take a moment to speak about what we're going to be learning about from today's webinar. We're going to revisit conflict and really identify what it is, as well as really explore some of the myths that can surround how it can be experienced. And then we're going to move into looking at what can get in the way when we're trying to problem solve, when we're trying to find solutions. What are some of the barriers we can encounter? From there, we're going to learn about how we can make compassion the core, compassion the foundation to how we navigate misunderstandings, as well as learn ways that we can be effective in our communication and be effective in our listening. Throughout the webinar as well, we're going to be learning about different tools that we can use to help repair, restore relationships, and really honor our connections. Let's talk about conflict. Conflict is more than just a disagreement. Conflict can tend to be an experience that we don't tend to associate as a positive one or a pleasurable one. And that can be because conflict is sometimes, or maybe more often than not, really uncomfortable. And that sense of discomfort can come from the fact that conflict can feel incredibly threatening. It can feel incredibly threatening to our sense of self, our beliefs, and our needs. And that can all really shape how impactful it is for us to experience it. The other piece about conflict is that when it's ignored or when it's allowed to continue and go unaddressed, it has the tendency to escalate. And because it's so connected to our well-being and our sense of survival, conflict ends up staying with us. We can't necessarily detach ourselves from it until we're able to find a place of solution. When conflict happens, we often respond to it based on our perceptions, and our perceptions are shaped by our life experiences, our culture, our values, and beliefs. So that's the reason why when conflict happens, folks can have different experiences, different interpretations of what that conflict is. Conflict can trigger strong emotions. Absolutely. And that's because it can feel so threatening, and it's so connected to our sense of survival that it can even trigger our fight or flight response. And that can really influence whether it is something we lean towards or whether it's something we lean away from. At the same time, conflict can be an opportunity for growth. And that's because when we're able to resolve conflict, that can allow us with the opportunity to deepen and strengthen our relationship because it requires willingness to do so. It requires us to show up with openness, with flexibility. It requires us to be able to hold space for our own experience, emotions, and needs, and at the same time for others' experiences, emotions, and needs. It it comes with knowing how to hold both at the same time, even when others' needs look different than our own, or we might disagree with them. Let's unpack some conflict myths. Maybe these are some ideas that you've heard around what conflict is. Avoiding conflict is the best solution. Well, it might be easier sometimes, um, but we do know that when we avoid conflict, what can end up happening is that it can escalate. It can grow in intensity and it can become more complex. What it does is be from that space and that time, not only does it increase in intensity, but it can also increase in the emotional impact. It can lead to the development of assumptions, the development of stories, which can sometimes hook us. Conflict resolution should be quick. While resolving conflict can take time, and that's a positive that's a positive thing, because sometimes we need to go back and revisit those solutions that we've come up with to help make sure, excuse me, that those solutions align with the needs of all parties involved, because that really sets the tone for the relationship we're trying to cultivate in ensuring that everyone is pleased and everyone's needs are being met in the solutions that are being developed. Emotions have no place in conflict resolution. Being able to identify our emotions can really help us uncover what's underneath. It can help us uncover what our underlying needs are, and that can help us become better equipped to navigate resolution. So, emotions very much do have a place in how we resolve conflict and how we problem solve. The loudest voice wins. Raising our voice doesn't resolve conflict. It can create fear and intimidation. Maybe the person who has the loudest voice, maybe their needs get met. However, at the expense of everyone else's, because everyone else ends up being left unheard, unseen, and their needs go unmet. So, how can we make compassion the core of how we navigate problem solving, how we navigate when we're trying to repair and find solutions after a disagreement has happened? One way we can do that is by making sure we always humanize others. And this is because we can sometimes dehumanize folks whom we're experiencing conflict with, especially when there is a disagreement there. When we disagree with others, sometimes that can cause their humanity to kind of go out of the window. What that can result in is our scope becoming a lot more narrow to the point where all we can see is what is on our side of the street. And that can prevent us from recognizing others' humanity and disconnecting us from our ability to see and to consider what might be going on for them. We end up losing sight on what might potentially be happening on their side of the street. by widening our scope and humanizing others during times of conflict, that excuse me, that can help create a desire to really understand what other folks are moving through. It can help reduce tension. It can help invite communication and foster compassion. Um, and so it's really important to stay connected, even during those times of conflict, that others are going to have different opinions, different emotions, different thoughts, different experiences, and that's okay. It doesn't mean um, those experiences don't make them human. It doesn't mean that these folks aren't deserving to be seen in their uniqueness or to be treated with compassion. Hmm. Additionally, when we're in a misunderstanding, and because of how threatening that can feel, it can also impact how we listen. It can impact whether we fall into defensiveness or whether we listen to understand. It's really important when we're looking at making compassion the core of how we navigate disagreements to make sure that we're giving others our full attention and our full presence. This is what allows us to listen to what is being shared verbally as well as what's being communicated non-verbally. That also allows us to show folks that they're seen, heard, and understood. When we're able to lean into compassion regularly in all of our interactions, not only when we're experiencing conflict, that can help reduce the frequency when that happens over time, because that allows us to regularly take the time and make the space to hold others, to hold their experiences, to listen from a genuine place of wanting to know and understand. Sometimes when a disagreement can occur, we can feel really stuck or resistant. And that experience can be described as willfulness. Willfulness is the state of inflexibility. It's when we're feeling stuck, when we're feeling resistant, when we're feeling closed off to change. When we're in a state of willfulness, we might find ourselves not being receptive to different ideas, different possibilities, viewpoints, or even approaches. Um, we don't want to hear it. We're not able to stay open to receive it. Alternatively, willingness is when we're able to be open, be receptive, and be connected to the present moment. This is when we want to learn and we want to absorb. We're open to learning different ideas, different possibilities, strategies, approaches. We want to problem solve, we want to collaborate. And when we think about how we can practice compassion during misunderstandings, that can be achieved through adopting an attitude of willingness and staying open um, and flexible throughout that process. How we can cultivate willingness starts by working to describe what happened. What happened, who was involved, when it happened, really staying focused on the facts. The next step is to explore, how is willfulness showing up for you? Working to identify your emotions, your thoughts, and your physical sensations that are showing up in your body. All that information can help describe how resistance is showing up for you, or how stuckness is showing up for you in response to that situation. After you've been able to describe that, um, we can reflect on, if we explore what our next steps are from that place of willfulness, what would that be? What would that picture look like? And now and the last step is exploring, what are you willing to do? So really looking at accepting the situation, um, finding openness and flexibility through willingness, and exploring how that's shifting or changing your emotions or your thoughts. And if you were to lean in from that place of openness, how would that change what your next steps would be? How would that change or shift what that picture would look like? How we experience conflict is linked to our emotions. As we can see, our emotions have a couple of different potential impacts when it comes to conflict. Our emotions can create conflict, and that's because really strong emotions and really intense emotions have an ability to turn our attention inwards, especially when there's anger or sadness that's there. And that can distract us from being able to be present and become more focused on our inner chatter or inner dialogue. When we're also feeling really intense emotions um, in social interactions, that can also cause us to sometimes misinterpret folks, either misinterpret their intentions, um, and sometimes the meaning behind their words, because we're not really fully present. We might have left, and again, our focus is either internally, or we might have left and gone back to the past. When a conflict is not addressed, it can escalate, and that impact can also transfer to our emotions. It can cause our emotions to increase in intensity. It can cause them to become more complex. And when that happens, that also will impact our ability to participate in finding solutions. Emotions can also de escalate conflict. And depending on the closeness of the relationship, if there's the presence of safety, security, and trust, that can also inform um, our our eagerness, our willingness to be an active participant in the problem-solving process. It can help diffuse tensions, and it can really help us lean into conflict from a place of compassion when it happens within a relationship that we highly value and that's really important or significant to us. We can also work towards becoming really clear on how we feel and managing our emotions, which will in turn help turn down the dial when conflict happens, or reduce it. One way we can do that is by working to name our emotions. And I recognize that when it comes to conflict, oftentimes anger is the usual word that's used to describe feelings in conflict situation. And anger is a little bit multifaceted, if I may say. Anger can be referred to as the mask emotion or second emotion because it can hide under other emotions. It can be something we feel after we felt another emotion first. It can hide under hurt, fear, frustration, loneliness, humiliation, and rejection. So I invite you, when you're working on naming the emotion, to explore, if you were not feeling anger, if that's the word that might have come up for you, what would you be feeling? We're going to claim our emotion and recognize that it's coming up for us in response to what's happening. And then lastly, explore how we can turn down the dial of intensity if we're feeling really strong emotions. That gives us an opportunity to focus on our coping tools, to focus on our strategies, to help make our emotions less uncomfortable, which will make them more tolerable, um, which will further inform our ability to sit with them while being able to stay connected to the present moment and prevent ourselves from becoming overwhelmed by them. The next step is to really explore the history, whether these emotions, the emotions you're feeling, have come up for you in the past when it came to conflict with either a specific person or a specific relational dynamic that brought up similar feelings. And then lastly, we're going to explore, now that we know what's there, what are we going to do with it? What are we going to do with those feelings? Are we going to talk to someone? Are we going to reach out and engage? Are we going to participate in further reflection? Or are we in a place where we're ready to learn more around beginning a conversation? When we begin exploring how we can use compassion to engage in dialogue and engage in communication with other folks, to help begin to move through problem solving, we really want to prioritize using assertive communication. Assertiveness, again, is the middle ground between passive and aggressive, and it's focused on expressing your needs, wants, beliefs, and values in an open way, in a way that's respectful, in a way that doesn't forget the fact that other folks have needs and their needs are valid. It avoids violating the rights of others, and it really keeps our perspective on making sure we're acknowledging and not losing sight of what others are moving through and what might be on the other side of that street. To put assertive communication into action begins with becoming clear around what it is that we want, really starting to explore what is at the root of the conflict. And that can be achieved by becoming curious around how we feel and what it is that we want. This can be guided through working to figure out, again, what's underneath those feelings. And there are also some prompts to help engage in that reflection, either focusing on if we need support, if we need to set a boundary, or if there's something we need to say no to. Once we have a clear understanding of how we feel, the next step is to explore how to gauge others in conversation to achieve our goals. And when we have this conversation, we want to have it compassionately and honor the needs and rights of others at the same time. It can be really helpful to gain clarity around what our objective is, what our goal is from engaging with other folks. What are we hoping to get out of it? Using the acronym Dear Man can help guide the conversation and create structure to it. Using the skill begins with describing the situation based on the facts to help bring everyone onto the same page, to ensure that we're all working from the same interpretation of what the problem is or what the situation is. The next step is to state how we feel, to be clear and let other folks know, how have we been impacted? How have we been affected by the situation? We're going to assert and be clear and concise, ensuring our truth, and reinforce folks. When we receive a positive response, we can reward others by smiling or saying thank you. The next step is mindful, really trying to stay focused on our objective, on that goal we have of the interaction, because sometimes our attention can be pulled into different directions. Um, and so it can be really important to really try to bring ourselves back to the present and stay focused on that goal we have. Appear confident, keeping in mind what our body language is like and what our body language might be communicating. Paying attention to our tone, our posture, our eye contact, while at the same time, knowing that there's going to be nuance in body language and how we express ourselves sometimes. So it's important that we know what confidence indicators are for us. Negotiate. Being open to compromising and being open to collaboration. Again, we want to make sure that everyone involved leaves the problem solving process feeling like they were heard and that their needs are met. And that comes with an ask for openness and willingness to explore different ways of how that can be achieved. How do we ask for what we want? How we ask for what we want is important to avoid others dropping into defensiveness and to make sure we're speaking from our own experiences. When we ask for what we want to focus on describing what's going on without judgment or blame. We want to share how we feel. And while we do that, we're not going to be asking others to change how they feel or how they think, because they're allowed to have emotions and thoughts that might be different from what is coming up for us. It's really about honoring other folks' experiences while being clear on what it is that we want. Going into more details around what that can sound like, we can use I statements, which can really help convey our feelings and thoughts in a way that also helps protect the relationship. When we use phrases such as, you make me feel, or I feel like, that can create feelings of defensiveness or feelings of being attacked on the receiving end, which is why we really want to focus on I statements to avoid that outcome. We can see here that I think is used. The use is focused to express what happened. I feel is focused on expressing our emotions, and I want is focused on expressing what the need is that we have. We spoke about how negotiation is an act of compassion because it involves collaboration and compromise to ensure that everyone is getting their needs met when participating in the problem-solving process. It allows folks to know that we want to hear them out and we want to understand what they have to say about a situation, and it lets them know that we want them to be pleased with the solution that we come up with. It helps us create, and as we can see, an atmosphere of trust and respect through letting folks know that we understand their individuality and that they're going to have different opinions, emotions, and needs, and that's okay. And we can validate that for them. We can validate what those opinions, emotions, and needs are. It also emphasizes the importance of letting them know that their needs haven't been forgotten, letting them know their needs matter, and that is an act of compassion. Sometimes we might feel like we need to sacrifice our values or our needs to validate the needs of others. And that's not necessarily the case. The FAST skill focuses on how we can stay true to our values during social interactions and protect our self-respect while also protecting and making sure we're maintaining a respect of others. This still starts off by being fair, considering each person's perspective, including your own, and ensuring that we're not taking advantage of anyone or being taken advantage of ourselves. The next one is no apologies. Really being mindful when that urge to apologize comes up for us, especially when you notice the need to apologize for making a request or for disagreeing. We have the right to do both, to make a request, to have a different opinion, to be in disagreement. Those aren't necessarily things we need to apologize for. So the A focuses on staying connected to when we need to apologize and to work towards avoiding over apologizing. Sticking to your values. Developing an understanding of your values, what matters for you, what your morals are, what your beliefs are, can really help create clarity around what's at the core for you. It can also be really important to be aware of what your bottom lines are. Our bottom lines can be described as what we will and will not tolerate in our lives. And lastly, the T is be truthful. Avoid being dishonest, be transparent, and show up in your full authenticity. How can we get information? Getting information allows us to learn about what others are moving through and avoid filling gaps with assumptions. This requires us to stay open and curious about the experiences of others. And how we get information around what folks are moving through is really through working to learn and be curious around what other folks' opinions are, what they think, what their needs are, and what their fears are. Because sometimes we can become absorbed with our own and have to be intentional around trying to figure out what that might look like for someone else. How to get information also comes with um, a requirement of us being present, showing up in the present moment, to be curious when we're learning about what someone else is moving through, meeting that information with respect. That allows other folks, again, to feel and know that they're seen, heard, and understood. This next skill focuses on how we can nurture and maintain strong relationships. And this really captures and highlights how we can maintain our relationships during and after and before conflict or disagreements occur. This skill begins with being gentle, being kind, being respectful, really working to prevent judgment, threats when we're interacting with folks. Showing interest, making it your goal to understand others, even when you disagree. Working towards listening to understand, listening without interruption, working to avoid mind reading, finishing other sentences, because that can shut folks down and cause folks to disengage. We can ask follow-up questions or clarifying questions if we need more information. Validate. Validation involves acknowledging others' thoughts and feelings. And this is something we can do verbally or do with our actions. This can sound like acknowledging that this has been really difficult, or looking at ways that we can help someone who might be moving through something difficult. And the E is focused on using an easy manner, bringing laughter, smiling, bringing lightness to our interactions and our relationships. I wanted to revisit a couple of takeaways before we wrap up our webinar. And the first takeaway is remembering that we respond to conflicts based on our perceptions. And our perceptions are influenced by our life experiences, our cultures, our values, our beliefs. And that's going to look different for each person. And when we don't resolve conflict, when it goes unaddressed, it can become larger, it can become more intense, and it can escalate. And because conflict is so connected to our sense of survival, it stays with us. It doesn't leave us until it is resolved. When we stay connected to and practice empathy, compassion, that keeps us able to always see that behind every person are unique experiences, concerns, and aspirations. That allows us to stay connected to not only what's on what's on our side of the street, but what other folks are moving through and what is happening on that other side. Emotions can create, escalate, and de-escalate conflict. Really using our tools when we notice ourselves feeling strong or intense emotions to help make those emotions less uncomfortable, which will allow them to be more tolerable and not overwhelm us. Assertive communication involves expressing your opinions, emotions, and needs without forgetting or violating the needs of others. Approaching experiences of conflict from a place of wanting to understand, even when you disagree, or if I could add, especially when you disagree, being curious, non-judgmental, and validating. We've come to the end of our webinar. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been such a great opportunity to be a host and to share this information with you today. If anything comes up for you, please feel free to reach out. I can be reached at wellness@guard.me. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thank you so much.